My name's Lillian. I am 27 years old, and I grew up between Jackson, Mississippi, and Houston, Texas. My father raised me with hard work, steady words, and the kind of quiet care that makes you believe in people. My mother was different. Her life was a blur of broken promises, sudden disappearances, and the smell of smoke that clung to her even after rehab. I thought grief would be the hardest part of losing my father. I was wrong. The air in the downtown Houston law office was stiff with perfume and tension. I sat at the polished oak table expecting to hear my father's final words through his will, something steady after months of pain. Instead, before the lawyer even finished the first page, my mother leaned forward with a smirk and announced to everyone, "She's cut out." My ears burned. The lawyer froze mid-sentence, his eyes darting across the paper as if unsure how to continue. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above and the shuffle of papers under his hand. In one moment, I felt erased. My chest tightened as I stared at the woman who gave me life, but never gave me peace. She sat with her hair neatly pinned, her lips painted a deep shade of red, and her smile stretched thin like she had been waiting for this performance. I expected pain. I didn't expect theater. My hands trembled under the table as I whispered, "That's not true." She didn't even glance at me. The lawyer cleared his throat and tried to go on, but his voice broke. The words didn't flow naturally. Lines were blacked out, dates didn't make sense, and clauses appeared rushed. The signature at the bottom of the page looked wrong. My father's name was there, but it sat stiff on the page, too perfect, almost pasted in. He had shaky hands toward the end, and nothing he signed ever looked that clean. A chill slid down my spine. In that moment, outrage mixed with disbelief. Could my own mother have tampered with my father's last wish? It sounded impossible, like a nightmare you try to wake from, but the way she leaned back in her chair with satisfaction made it feel real. She was polished, powerful, ready to destroy me with nothing more than words and paper. My father once told me, "Sometimes the biggest fights in life don't happen with fists, they happen with signatures." I understood him now. I looked around the room. My mother's new husband tapped his pen on the table like a silent threat. A cousin shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. No one spoke for me. I was alone in a room full of witnesses, all of them letting my story be rewritten in real time. My voice felt trapped, caught between fury and fear. When the reading ended, the lawyer stacked the papers quickly as though closing the book on my father's life. My mother gathered her purse, adjusted her bracelet, and whispered something to her husband that made them both laugh softly. The sound cut deeper than silence. I walked out into the Texas heat, the sky heavy with clouds threatening rain. My father was gone, and now, by my mother's word, so was my place in his legacy. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, replaying the moment over and over. Her smirk, the blacked out lines, the perfect signature. My father's voice echoed in my memory, "Check the drawer." I didn't understand it at first. A drawer? Was it real, or just something I was forcing myself to remember, because I needed hope? My chest rose and fell quickly. I couldn't breathe right. I was drowning in grief and betrayal, but deep down, a small fire flickered. If she was bold enough to erase me publicly, maybe she was careless enough to leave clues privately. The world outside my windshield blurred as the first drops of rain fell. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and whispered to myself, "This isn't over." I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew the truth was hiding somewhere, and I would find it. I drove back to my apartment on the edge of Houston, the road slick with rain, and my thoughts spinning in circles. The silence in the car was unbearable, so I turned on the radio. A country song about loss played, the singer's voice aching with the same heaviness I felt in my chest. I switched it off. My own mind was loud enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the apartment seemed louder, every shadow heavier. I closed my eyes, but instead of rest, memories of Jackson filled me. I was 10 years old again, standing next to my father as he checked the truck logs for his small company. The smell of diesel clung to his shirt, and his hands, rough but steady, guided mine as he showed me how to mark each box. "Details matter, Lil," he always said. "They'll protect you one day." I thought of the way he looked at me, like I was the only thing worth fighting for. He was quiet, but his love was loud in the way he saved, planned, and prepared for the future. He wanted me to inherit what he worked for. He wanted me safe. And now, in one stroke of a pen, my mother had announced I was cut out. When his illness came, cancer ate away at him slowly. I was 23 then, still finding my way in Houston, but I spent every weekend at his bedside. I brought him soup, listened to his stories, and held his hand when the pain became unbearable. My mother visited sometimes, but she never stayed long. The walls of the hospital room carried her absence like a shadow. The last night I saw him alive, he squeezed my hand and whispered something I didn't fully catch. I only remembered 2 words clearly: the drawer. At the time, I thought he was confused, maybe rambling. Now, with the memory of that strange will haunting me, those words returned with sharp clarity. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Could he have left something behind? A note, a letter, something hidden where only I would think to look? I grabbed my phone, scrolling through old texts, searching for any clue, any mention. Nothing. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. I whispered into the dark, "Dad, what did you mean?" The rain outside tapped against the window like a quiet reminder. Somewhere in this mess was the truth, and he had tried to tell me. I closed my eyes, my father's voice echoing once more, and I promised myself I would find that drawer. The next morning, I drove to my father's old house on the outskirts of Houston. It still smelled faintly of him, like coffee and engine oil. The furniture sat heavy with dust, and the silence inside felt sacred. My hands shook as I walked to his study, the room where he kept everything that mattered. I pulled open drawers one by one, papers rustling, old receipts spilling out, and bills stacked in rubber bands. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, at the back of the bottom drawer, I found a thin envelope taped underneath. My breath caught. I peeled it away and opened it with careful fingers. Inside were crumpled notes and unsigned drafts of wills, each one different from the document my mother had paraded. In every draft, my name was written. In one, he had written a note beside it. For her future, for her strength. My chest ached as tears blurred the words. I kept digging, my hands moving faster, desperate now. In another folder, I found receipts showing meetings with his lawyer just weeks before his death. The dates didn't match the will read at the office. Someone had interfered. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe I wasn't erased after all. Maybe this fight wasn't hopeless. But then I heard my mother's voice in my head, sharp and mocking, telling me I was nothing, that I had always been nothing. The sound nearly crushed the fire inside me. I clutched the drafts to my chest, whispering, "You wanted me to find this, didn't you?" One draft caught my eye. The date scrawled at the top, 2 weeks before his death. My name was still there. My father's shaky signature was at the bottom, imperfect and real. My hands trembled as I stared at it, knowing this could change everything. The house creaked in the silence, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like he was still with me. Armed with the drafts and receipts, I returned to the law office. The same lawyer who read the will sat behind his desk, his eyes guarded as I placed the papers in front of him. "These don't match what you read," I said, my voice steady though my hands shook. He adjusted his glasses, glancing quickly over the pages before sliding them back toward me. "I can't discuss private matters without proper authorization." "Private matters?" My voice cracked. "That was my father's will. I am his daughter." He didn't answer. He leaned back in his chair, the silence between us heavy with something unsaid. My gut twisted. He knew more than he admitted. I walked out of the office, my chest heavy, my eyes burning. The sun was blinding as I stepped into the street, the city moving around me like I didn't exist. On the drive home, the radio played a news story about another family in Louisiana fighting over an estate. It felt like the universe was mocking me. I pulled into my apartment, tears slipping down my face. I was drowning in grief and betrayal, but something kept pushing me forward. When I reached my door, I froze. A folded note was tucked under the mat. I bent down, my fingers shaking as I opened it. The words inside were scrawled in rushed handwriting. "I know what your mother did." The world tilted. Someone else knew. The note burned in my hand as I sat inside my apartment. Who would send this? Why now? My eyes scanned the message again and again, searching for more, but that was all it said. No signature. No number. Just those words. The next day, I got a call from a woman named Denise. She said she used to work as a paralegal for the lawyer who handled my father's estate. Her voice was calm, but there was urgency behind it. "I think you should see something," she said. We met at a coffee shop in Dallas. She was older than me, maybe in her 40s, with tired eyes but a steady presence. She pulled out a laptop and opened a folder of files. "Your father was careful," she said. "He kept drafts, notes, and emails. I saved copies before I left." On the screen were drafts with my name clearly written. Emails between my father and the lawyer showed him insisting that I remain part of the estate. Then another set of emails appeared, messages from my mother to the lawyer, pushing, pressuring, demanding changes. I sat frozen, my coffee untouched. "She really did it," I whispered. Denise nodded. "And I think she paid him to make it happen." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it pressing down. Then she looked at me and said, "If you want to fight this, I'll help you." For the first time since the funeral, I felt something like hope. The first time Denise showed me the emails, I felt like my world split in two. On one side was the life I thought I had, the legacy I thought my father left for me. On the other side was a darker truth, a carefully built trap where my mother's lies had been stitched into legal documents. Denise leaned across the table, her voice low. "These messages have timestamps. They show the exact dates your father wrote and the dates your mother pushed to have things changed. If you want to challenge this, the timeline matters." Her words struck me like lightning. Dates. Timestamps. I remember my father's old way of saying, "Paper never lies." Denise handed me a folder with copies of the files. I held it like it was gold. For the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt armed. That night in my apartment, I spread everything across the kitchen table. Drafts, receipts, printed emails. My hands moved quickly, almost desperate, arranging papers into piles. The glow from the single lamp cast long shadows across the room, and for a moment, I felt like a detective in my own life. Each email told a story. My father, weak but clear in his wishes. My mother, forceful, calculating, pressing the lawyer for changes. Still, doubt whispered at me. What if the judge ignored it? What if the lawyer denied everything? My stomach twisted with fear. I remembered being 12, waiting for my mother to pick me up after school. She never came. I sat on the curb for hours until my father arrived. That same pit of abandonment rose in me now. I pressed my palms against the table, whispering to myself, "You can't give up. Not now." Scrolling through one email chain, my breath caught. A message showed my mother promising a bonus if changes were made. The date was 3 days before the altered will appeared. My skin prickled. This wasn't just manipulation, it was bribery. I sat back in my chair, my heart racing. I knew then this wasn't only about protecting myself. It was about protecting my father's name. The walls of my apartment felt too small, the silence too heavy. I needed air. I grabbed the folder and stepped outside into the night. The Texas sky was clear, stars spread wide above me, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt like maybe I had a chance. Then my phone buzzed. It was Denise. Her voice was quick, urgent. "We can't wait. We need to file to freeze the estate tomorrow. If we don't, your mother will move the money and assets out of reach." I clutched the folder tighter. My hands shook, but my voice was steady. "Let's do it." The next morning, we walked into the courthouse together, our steps echoing on the marble floor. My chest was tight, but fire burned in me now. We filed the motion, and the clerk stamped the papers with a heavy thud. Hours later, the judge reviewed it quickly. My breath held as the gavel struck wood. Temporary hold granted. Relief surged through me like water breaking a dam. I wanted to scream, to cry, to laugh all at once. But just as we stepped out into the sunlight, I froze. My mother was standing by the courthouse steps, waiting, her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned close enough for only me to hear. "You'll regret this." Her voice followed me long after she walked away. Cold, sharp, and dripping with confidence. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel, the words replaying again and again. "You'll regret this." Denise sat beside me, calm as ever. "She's trying to rattle you. Don't let her." But I couldn't stop shaking. My mother always knew how to get under my skin. She had done it since I was a child. Still, I forced myself to take a breath. We had won a small victory. The estate was frozen. My father's legacy wasn't lost yet. That night, I allowed myself a small moment of peace. I walked to the park near my apartment, listening to children's laughter as they chased each other on the playground. Their joy reminded me of what my father used to say, "Life's about the small wins, Lil. Collect them." For once, I let myself believe him. But peace never lasted long with my mother. 2 days later, I walked to the parking lot after work and stopped dead in my tracks. My car door was open. Papers were scattered across the seat and spilling onto the ground. My heart pounded as I rushed forward. The folder Denise gave me was gone. I dropped to my knees, picking up what I could, but the most important documents, the emails with timestamps, were missing. My breath came fast, shallow, panic rising. Someone had been inside my car. Denise arrived minutes later after I called her in tears. She crouched beside me, scanning the damage. "This isn't random. They wanted you scared." I clutched one torn page against my chest, my eyes wide. "It worked." She put a steady hand on my shoulder. "Then we make copies of everything from now on. Every file, every note, we triple it." Her calmness steadied me, but fear lingered in my chest. If they were willing to break into my car, what else would they do? That night, I lay awake listening to every sound outside my window. The hum of a passing car, the bark of a dog, the creak of the building settling. My heart jumped at each one. I turned to face the ceiling, whispering into the dark, "Dad, I'm trying. I just don't know if I can handle this." The shadows didn't answer. But the next morning, a knock came at my door. I opened it to see a man I hadn't expected. My father's old business partner stood there, holding a folder, his face grave. "I think you should see this," he said. His name was Carl, and he had worked alongside my father for more than 20 years in the trucking business. His face was weathered, his voice steady, but there was sadness in his eyes. We sat at my kitchen table while he slid the folder toward me. "Your dad trusted me with this before he passed. He said if things ever looked wrong, you'd need it." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were financial statements, handwritten notes, and a sealed letter addressed to the lawyer. The sight of my father's handwriting made my eyes burn. I opened the letter carefully, reading each word. In it, my father outlined his wishes clearly. His estate was to go to me, with a trust set aside for charity. He wrote that my mother's history with addiction made her unfit to control it. His words were sharp, honest, and heartbreaking. Tears streamed down my face. He knew. He had tried to protect me. Carl placed a hand on mine. "Your mom knew this letter existed. That's why she moved so fast after his death." I nodded slowly, the truth settling heavy in my chest. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had betrayed him. But there was no time to mourn. That night, Denise called with more bad news. "Your mother hired a new attorney. Big name, powerful, connected. They'll fight dirty." I sat on my bed gripping the phone, my pulse racing. I thought about my car, my stolen documents, and now this. My mother wasn't backing down. She was doubling her attack. I hung up, staring into the darkness of my room. Then I heard it, glass shattering in the living room. I froze. Someone was inside my apartment. The sound of breaking glass jolted me upright. My chest tightened as I tiptoed toward the living room, every nerve on edge. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy lamp from the hallway table. My hands trembled as I stepped into the living room. The window was shattered, the curtains swaying in the night air. But the room was empty. I looked around, my heart pounding. On the floor lay a single piece of paper, folded neatly. I picked it up with shaking hands. Written across it in bold letters was one line: "Stop before it's too late." Fear clawed at me, but anger burned hotter. I tore the note in half, my hand shaking. "I won't stop," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. The next morning, I met with Denise and Carl at a diner. We sat in a booth at the back, the smell of coffee and bacon filling the air. I told them everything, from the broken window to the threatening note. Denise's jaw tightened. "They want to scare you into silence." Carl shook his head. "Your father wouldn't want you to back down. He left this for a reason." Their support steadied me, even as fear lingered. That afternoon, Carl handed me another folder. "This one's different. It's not just notes. It's proof." Inside were copies of bank transactions, large sums of money transferred to the lawyer just days before the will was changed. My pulse quickened as I scanned the pages. This was the missing piece. I looked up at them, my voice trembling but sure. "We take this to court." And for the first time, I believed we could win. But later that night, as I sat in my car outside the courthouse, gathering my courage, a shadow moved in the rearview mirror. Someone was watching me. I froze in the driver's seat, my breath caught in my throat. The shadow lingered behind me, too still to be a passerby. My hand hovered over the ignition, torn between fleeing and confronting whoever it was. Finally, I forced myself to turn and look. A man in a dark hoodie stood just feet away, staring at me through the glass. My chest tightened, and I fumbled to lock the doors. But before I could, he walked away into the night, leaving me shaking and breathless. The next morning, I walked into the courtroom with Denise and Carl by my side. The air was heavy with tension. My mother sat across the aisle, her polished attorney beside her, whispering in her ear. She didn't look at me, but I felt the weight of her presence. The judge entered, and the hearing began. Denise presented the drafts, the receipts, the emails. My hands gripped the edge of the table, every muscle tense. When the sealed letter was handed over, the courtroom shifted. People leaned in, whispers spreading as the judge read my father's words aloud. His handwriting, his wishes, his truth. I blinked back tears as I listened, my father's voice echoing in my memory. The judge set the letter down slowly. "This changes the matter before us." Relief surged through me, but it was short-lived. My mother's attorney stood, sharp and confident. "This letter could be forged. We demand handwriting analysis." The judge nodded. "Very well. We will order forensic examination." My heart pounded as the gavel struck. It was a step forward, but the battle was far from over. That night, Denise called me, her voice steady but urgent. "I just got word. The analysis shows the signature on the altered will was digitally copied." For a moment, the world went silent. Proof. Clear, undeniable proof. But before I could breathe, Denise's voice lowered. "Your mother knows we have it. Be careful, Lillian. She's not done yet." The first time I heard the words digitally copied, I felt my father's voice rise inside me. Proof. Real proof. I sat at my kitchen table gripping the phone, Denise's words echoing in my ear, the air heavy with both relief and fear. The altered will was a fraud. Every doubt I carried, every sleepless night, had been leading here. The court date came faster than I expected. The building smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Denise by my side, Carl in the row behind us. My mother sat across the room, her attorney sharp in his suit, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as though she were untouchable. She didn't look at me, not once. The forensic analyst took the stand. His voice was calm, technical, but each word landed like a hammer. The signature on the contested will was digitally copied and overlaid. It does not match the natural flow of a handwritten signature. The courtroom stirred. People whispered, heads turned, and I felt the weight of justice shifting. For a moment, I thought I could breathe again. But then my mother's lawyer rose, his voice like a blade. We do not accept this analysis. Forensics can be manipulated, and this so-called proof is not enough to undo a legal document. My stomach knotted as I watched the judge's face. Neutral, unreadable. My hands clenched in my lap. What if the truth wasn't enough? What if all of this still slipped away? Denise leaned closer, her whisper steady. Stay calm. This is just the beginning. When court recessed for the day, I walked outside into the Houston heat. The crowd buzzed, reporters lingering at the steps. My name was suddenly out there, tied to scandal and betrayal. I felt exposed, raw, but I also felt seen for the first time in months. That night, I sat on my bed holding my father's letter. His shaky handwriting, his plea to protect me, burned into my memory. My chest rose and fell quickly as I whispered to the empty room. I won't stop. Not until they hear you. The next morning, I woke to a headline. Houston woman challenges altered will, forgery alleged. My story was no longer just mine. It was public. The attention came fast. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years dropped by, their faces full of sympathy. One woman from down the street brought me a casserole, placing it gently in my hands as if kindness could steady me. For a moment, I let myself feel the warmth. But kindness couldn't erase what was still coming. The courtroom was more crowded now. People leaned forward in their seats, hungry for every detail. My mother walked in with her attorney, dressed in a sharp navy suit, her chin high as though none of this touched her. She glanced at me once, her eyes cold, and then looked away. Denise presented the bank records Carl had given us, large transfers from my mother to the lawyer just days before the altered will appeared. The evidence stacked higher and higher, each page another stone laid against her. The judge listened, silent, his eyes narrowing slightly as the documents piled up. I watched my mother's hands grip the edge of the table. For the first time, her calm cracked. Her lawyer whispered in her ear, but she shook her head quickly, her lips pressed tight. The tension was unbearable. My chest rose and fell in sharp bursts, my heart racing with every second. I thought of my father, of his quiet strength, of the way he always told me to keep standing even when the ground shook beneath me. Then it happened. In the middle of Denise's presentation, my mother gasped loudly and clutched her chest. She fell against her chair, moaning for attention. The courtroom erupted, people rushing forward, voices shouting. The judge called for order. Paramedics were summoned, and my mother was wheeled out on a stretcher, her face pale but her eyes still sharp as they darted toward me. Was it real? Or just another performance to buy her time? The courthouse felt different after her collapse. The tension lingered in the air, thick with suspicion. Some people whispered about her health. Others whispered about her lies. I sat alone at the table, my hands pressed together, my thoughts spinning. That evening, Denise called me. Her voice was firm, steady. They're going to offer a settlement. Be ready. She was right. The next morning, my mother's attorney approached us outside the courtroom. His words were smooth, carefully chosen. If you drop the charges and withdraw the claim, there will be compensation. Substantial compensation. No more trials, no more headlines. For a moment, the weight of exhaustion pressed down on me. The idea of ending it all, of walking away from the storm, was tempting. My life had been torn apart, my nights sleepless, my safety threatened. I could end it right there. But then I remembered my father's words, spoken years ago as we sat on the porch in Jackson. Don't ever sell your name cheap, Lil. It's the one thing no one can buy back for you. His voice echoed in my head, strong and certain. I looked the attorney in the eye and shook my head. No deal. Denise placed a reassuring hand on my arm. We're not here for hush money. We're here for the truth. The lawyer's mask of calm slipped for just a moment. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. He turned and walked back to where my mother sat in her wheelchair, pale but watching me with cold fury. I turned away, my chest rising with both fear and strength. The road ahead was harder now, but I knew where it led. The final showdown was coming. The day of the final hearing arrived, and the courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, pens poised, cameras flashing. The judge entered, his expression unreadable, the air thick with expectation. Denise began, her voice strong and clear. She laid out the evidence step by step. The drafts, the receipts, the emails, the bank transfers, and finally, the forensic report. Each piece landed heavier than the last, building into a wall of truth that no one could climb over. Then the forensic analyst returned to the stand. His words were measured but final. The signature on the contested will was digitally fabricated. The authentic drafts and handwritten letter are consistent with the decedent's natural writing. There is no doubt. The room buzzed. I looked across the aisle at my mother. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight, her hands gripping her wheelchair as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. For the first time, she looked small. The judge's gavel struck. The contested will is invalid. The estate shall be distributed according to the authentic documents provided. Relief washed over me, so powerful it nearly knocked me back. My throat tightened, my eyes burned, but I held myself steady. I turned to Denise and whispered, "We did it." But when I looked back at my mother, her eyes met mine. They weren't just angry. They were broken. A part of me ached, even in victory. She had been my mother, flawed and cruel, but still mine. The gavel struck again, final and sharp. The battle was over. The weeks that followed felt like stepping out of a storm into the quiet of morning. The estate was settled, my father's wishes restored. I stood in the lawyer's office, signing the final papers with a steady hand, my heart lighter than it had been in months. But victory didn't taste like triumph. It tasted like peace. I decided not to keep everything for myself. I set up a scholarship in my father's name, one that would help families of truckers put their children through school. It felt right, like carrying his legacy forward in a way money alone never could. One sunny afternoon, I drove back to Jackson. The cemetery was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of magnolias. I placed fresh flowers on my father's grave, kneeling beside the stone. My voice shook as I whispered, "I kept my place, Dad. They tried to erase me, but I held on. I hope you're proud." The wind stirred, gentle and calm, as though answering me. For the first time since his death, I felt him near. Back in Houston, life slowly found its rhythm again. I went for walks, cooked simple meals, and learned how to sleep without fear pressing against my chest. But then, one morning, an envelope arrived in the mail. The handwriting on the front was familiar, my mother's. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. Her words were shaky but clear. She wrote that she had checked herself into rehab again, this time by choice. She said she was sorry. Not for everything, not in the way I once dreamed of, but sorry enough to admit she had hurt me. She ended the letter with one line, "I hope one day you can forgive me." I sat at my kitchen table staring at the paper, my chest heavy with emotion. Forgiveness didn't come easy, not after everything she had done. But for the first time, I didn't feel rage when I thought of her. I felt pity. And maybe, in some distant future, I could feel more. That night, I walked outside and looked up at the stars. The air was cool, the city lights dim in the distance. I thought of my father, of the battles we had fought together even after his death, and of the quiet justice we had finally won. I whispered into the night, "You can rest now. So can I." And with that, I closed my eyes, not in grief, not in fear, but in calm relief, knowing I had reclaimed my truth, my name, and my place in the story.